In this video, we are going to learn two methods using which you can combine multiple subtools together. Depending on what these subtools are, one might work better than the other. At the end of this video, we will discuss the merits and demerits of each method. The first method that I'm going to discuss is going to be Booleans, and the second method is going to be using DYNAMESH. So let's start off with the Boolean method. If you don't know what Booleans are, basically what Zbrush does when you combine objects and unionize them using Booleans is that it attaches those two objects together and finds the most optimal way to remesh that mesh with those two objects using quads and triangles. So once we combine our two meshes, we'll see what that looks like. I have my meshes in a folder over here. So this is my whole object. We're not going to combine all of this. We are just going to focus on this door and this pattern. So these are the two objects that we are combining. And if I go to the subtool, not the folder, just the subtool, and click on Control Shift and this I, it is going to hide everything else in the scene, and it's just going to, and I'll be able to just make these two objects visible. So let's take a look at how we can combine these two. I have put my two objects in a folder to make this process easier. So I'm just going to click on the settings button on this folder, and you'll get a bunch of options here. The option that I want is Boolean folder. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to do its thing, union, remeshing in progress. And once it's done, this is going to go away. So the remeshing and the union is done. You can see these overlapping objects here just because we have this one selected, even though Zbrush has hidden this folder for us with our two objects not combined. Since we have this object selected, it's still going to be visible. So I'm going to just select this one instead so that it hides everything else. And let's look at what Zbrush gave us. I can click on this button right here to show our wireframe, or I can hit Shift F on the keyboard. So this is what Zbrush has given us. It's given us these objects are combined, but everything is full of triangles, and I can try to smooth this out and like sculpt some more on this, but I get super weird results. So when you use Booleans, you usually have to also use the Z remesher to make sure you get quads and you can sculpt on this, because even if I divide this, it's going to give me really strange results and I'm not going to be able to get the results that I want. So I'm going to use this Boolean mesh, the one that I have here, and I'm going to use the Z remesher on it. And I'm increasing the target polygon count to around 20 just so that I don't lose all this detail that I have here. Depending on your object, you might want it to be less or you might want it to be more than what I have. I'm going to run this and we'll see what that looks like. So the Z remesher has finished running and this is my result. If I turn on the polygons, you can see that this is what I've received. And the pattern that I had earlier wasn't, it was still a little rough. It was just more like a sketch. So I do have some issues here and I could probably increase the target polygon counts or change some of these other settings to get better results and not have stuff like this. But if you do have problems like this, these are very easily fixed by just hitting the smooth tool and editing that. You can then, once you have this, you can also hit divide and you get way better results than you had when you just had the Boolean. So whenever you're using the Boolean method, you always have to use the Z remesher as well to get rid of all the triangles. and have a good quad topology throughout. Now, let's take a look at the DYNAMESH method of combining different subtools together. For this method, I have another part of this cabinet, which is basically this guy right here. I blocked him out using different subtools so that I could just focus on the different parts and then combine them later. So I have all these parts right here. And this is still a work in progress that he doesn't have hand yet, but let us combine these objects together and see how we can attach them. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did for Booleans, which is put all my objects within a folder and then click on this settings icon near the folder. The reason I always put my objects in a folder is because it saves a copy of your stuff. So even after you combine the objects, you still have all these separate parts in a folder that you can come back to at any point. So I'm going to click on this settings icon right here on this folder and click on merge folder. That is going to hide the folder and everything inside it. So I'm going to close this out. And right below the folder, you have your merged object. And even though this is now all one object, if I try to move these around, let's try that, you can still see that they are not attached together. So I'm going to use the DYNAMESH tool to attach them. Let's close out the subtool menu. Let's go to Geometry and DYNAMESH. So let's see what the default settings of DYNAMESH do for us. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to get rid of all the detail and give us this blob that is definitely not what we want. So I'm going to Control Z to undo, and let us change the settings. So this is a pretty high detailed prop, so I'm just going to increase the resolution to quite a bit. So this number over here, it really depends on your prop. You need to test out a few resolutions and see which one gives you the best result. I'm going to go all the way up to 2000 because I tested this earlier and anything about 2000 seems to work for this. So I'm going to go to that and click on DYNAMESH again. And that is retaining most of our detail. We're still losing a little bit, which we can edit this later, so I'm not too worried, but it's retaining most of our detail. And now let's look at what that has done. And you can see every part which was separate earlier is now attached together, and we can hold down Shift to smooth these attachment points. I'm going to do the same over here so you can kind of see how the DYNAMESH works. And topology wise, let's hold Shift F. What DYNAMESH does is that it gives you this grid-like topology. The topology is triangles and quads, and it doesn't follow the shape of your mesh at all. It just gives you a grid. So this is not an ideal topology to end with. After joining everything together, what I like to do is I like to smooth out some of these really rough areas. And once I do that, I again like to use the Z-remesher to fix this terrible topology. For this mesh, to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the subtool menu and I'm going to duplicate this mesh. And before duplicating, I'm just going to rename this. So I'm going to call this DYNAMESH guy. And then I'm going to duplicate this and name the duplicate Z-remesh guy. You'll see why we're doing this in a second. So when we Z-remesh a very high detail object like this, we are going to get some loss of detail. Let me hide my DYNAMESH and just go to the Z-remesh, and let us go to Geometry and Z-remesher. I'm going to increase this a little bit just so we get the resolution that we need, and then hit Z-remesher. Our Z-remesher is complete. But you can see that I have lost a lot of detail on this character. Let's see how much. So let me show you what my actual character looks like. This is what it looks like. And this is what I have right now, which is not great. So my next step is to bring this detail back on this good topology. So this is not production ready topology, but this is good to have while we are working within ZBrush. And it is mostly, for the most part, following the shape of our mesh. So I want this level of detail, the detail that I have here, on this ZRemeshed version with nice topology. And to do that, I'm going to first divide this mesh. So I am going to my ZRemesh and I am going to geometry and hitting divide maybe let's say 3 or 4 times so that I have a subdivided mesh that can hold detail. And it still doesn't have the detail that we need. So we need to project this detail onto this ZRemesh mesh. To do that, we need both meshes visible. So I'm going to turn my DYNAMESH on. I'm going to keep this visible as well. And make sure my ZRemesh mesh is selected. And I'm going to go down to project. And let's see what our settings are here. Most of the time, the default settings for project work really well. So let us test that out. I have my ZRemeshed version that has 4 subdivision levels, and let's project that detail. So I'm going to just hit project all, and it's going to project mesh details. Let's see what we got. And let me hide my DYNAMESH guy. And you can see here that we have all the detail that we had on this on our ZRemeshed version. So on the ZRemeshed version, we have a lowest subdivision of 1 with this topology, and we have a higher subdivision level with all our detail, which is really what we want to have while we're working in ZBrush. This is the biggest advantage of using ZBrush, that you have these multiple subdivision levels. And now, once we have this, once we've projected that detail and we have it on this new mesh, we can delete this if we want to. Since we don't need it anymore, we can just delete that. And that leaves us with this final mesh. Let's discuss a few considerations to take while using both of these methods. So in this section, what I've done is I have used the Boolean method on my character, and I have used the DYNAMESH method on this door. You can see immediately one of the disadvantages of using DYNAMESH is that you get this faceting on your mesh, and for a prop like this, we definitely do not want that. When we created these hard surface edges earlier purposely so that we would be able to sculpt on this easier. So this is what I want. I want more hard surface edges, and I do not really like what DYNAMESH has given me. Sometimes you can increase the resolution and get rid of this faceting, but you do end up getting some of this either way with DYNAMESH. And let's look at what the Boolean character has given us. Honestly, Boolean did a pretty good job. You can see that it's attached this character together, and we have not lost any detail anywhere. We are, if I select this, we're still maintaining the topology that we had on each different piece. So these pieces were a little low poly. These were a little higher poly, so it has maintained that topology. With Booleans, it sort of maintains your topology that you had earlier, And with the Dynamesh, it gives you an even resolution, an even grid resolution throughout that you can then repurpose. So depending on what you're doing, you might prefer one or the other. Sometimes you might prefer to just use one of them. Sometimes Booleans might be your go-to for combining meshes. Sometimes it might be Dynamesh. But hopefully this video has given you some ideas on how to use both of these methods. These are not the only two ways to combine meshes. There are other ways, but these are two that I find myself using and two that I find the most convenient to work with.